Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolo. Now let's turn to the disturbing topic of security in Nigeria and the army's raids on what it calls criminal gangs in the country's northwest, northeast and southeast regions. The latest independent security report from the security firm Beacon Consulting paints a mixed picture of the situation in the country, with the Nigerian army recording some apparent successes, carrying out operations against separatists in the southeast and bombing raids against criminal gangs known as bandits and insurgents in the north of Nigeria. But there are also allegations of the security forces killing dozens of people in both regions and never really bringing anyone to trial. And the report also mentions a long list of continuing incidents of violence and kidnappings. Well, for further assessment of the findings of that report, I'm joined now in the studio by its author, the CEO and founder of the security firm Beacon Consulting, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Charles.
Just briefly summarize for us the high points of that report.
Well, let's start from June. In June, we recorded 1,032 deaths. Now, in July, there was a reduction about 39% to about 658. So clearly, it showed that the government, its security agencies were doing something right if they were able to reduce the fatalities by about 39%.
But when you say deaths, who are we talking about?
Mainly villagers. Rural communities.
So people caught in the crossfire or people killed
by
the
armed conflict,
right,
or people who were attacked and killed by gunmen. I mean, the Northwest and North Central has consistently been at the top of the rate of fatalities. So most of these people are from the North Central and Northwest of Nigeria.
Right, and according to your report and from what you're saying now, the army appeared to be to some extent wresting control from both the insurgents and the bandits. Many of them said to be, from what we also read, not just in your report, but beyond that, many of them said to be surrendering, for example, and I emphasize said to be. What's led to this turn of events?
There was a presidential directive when, after some incidences in Zamfara and Katsina, the president authorized, as it were, the military to go after the gunmen. And so immediately after that, we saw the military intensifying, because there has always been operations, but they intensified the operations, and it was a result of the intensification that we saw the shooting down of one of the fighter jets in specifically the border area between Katsina and Zamfara and Kaduna. And so this is the type of things we've seen almost across everywhere in the country, where the military has increased the level of operations, especially the Air Force. We've seen that kind of vigorous action by the Air Force, and then of course with the support of the Nigerian Army. The police too, especially if you look at the southeast and several other parts of the country, the police has also been doing its own operation. And a good indication of that is, first off, the arrest of Nnamdi Kanu the previous month, in June, and then of course the arrest of Sunday Igboho in Benin in July. So clearly indicating that there is an increased effort by the security agencies, just like they are increasing their effort in the Northwest and North Central. The only difference, and we highlighted that in the report, is why we're yet to see them arresting the leadership of some of these groups in the Northwest. We specifically mentioned the name of Ali Kachala, who allegedly is behind the shooting down of that jet bomber. Anyone who has that capacity to shoot a jet bomber, should be arrested or killed, as it were. So those are the kind of things that we've seen in the movement.
Right. So and it's you make an interesting point there, because it doesn't look like, we rarely see people sort of arrested and taken to court. I can't remember the last time I actually saw anybody who is either a bandit or an insurgent. Apart from the separatists, Nnamdi Kanu and all the rest of them who are going to court, we don't tend to see those people. They tend to either be killed in combat? Is that because they sort of fight back, essentially?
That's one of the reasons. The other reason is they are essentially outlaws. They have decided as a principle that they've rejected the Nigerian law, and so they've carved out a territory, the so-called ungoverned space, where they stay. And it's difficult, and this is the part that for me as a security expert, I ask the question, why hasn't Nigeria broken that jinx? The Nigerian security agencies have found it difficult to go into those ungoverned spaces in a tactical manner and to, as it were, take them out. So every time they go there, it's with force, and in most instances the Air Force does it. They drop bombs, and very difficult really to effect arrest in those type of circumstances. If we had tactical powers of the type that other countries have, then it would be easy for them to go into those forests, arrest them, take out their leaders actually, and then arrest the ones that they can arrest.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Air Force and the fact that it appears to be a kind of determining factor to some extent these days. But I mean, the government must be pretty pleased with this apparent success. I mean, if one can call it that. But crucially, of course, the civilians who are always caught in the middle of these fights, as you mentioned earlier, tend to pay a high price. I mean, what information does your report provide about that?
About the deaths of the civilians?
Yeah, civilians quite. I mean, you mentioned a number of them at the beginning, but a little more about the impact that all this is having on civilians.
I mean, first off, the impact on the economy. Most of these locations that we're discussing, they can't go to their farms, and they are mostly agrarian. Now, if in a circumstance where it's impossible for them to go to their farms, then their livelihood is affected. Women and children in particular are put in situations where, I mean, one of the most horrendous reports I've had to write is in a part in the northeast where the women had to bury the dead because there were no men alive that could do that. And incidentally, they didn't even know how to go about burying the dead. So those are the kind of things that we're seeing. I use the word consciously there, that social order has been broken down. So all the ramifications, all those aspects of life that we know it as a civilized society, unfortunately are being affected. But the good news is, as a result of these enhanced security operations, we're seeing a gradual return in some of these communities to those livelihoods. We're seeing them going back to farm, we're seeing markets opening and little things like that. But the worry, and we emphasize that in the report, is sustainability. It appears that it's the federal government alone that is taking on that fight. Now, at what point would the state governments, adopt the fight and ensure that this becomes sustainable? Now, the argument would be.
But when you say adopt the fight, how are they going to do that? I mean,
the argument is they don't own the security forces, but the forest, as an example, where these bandits hide, belong to them. They have jurisdiction over that. So, what are they going to do to turn those forests into economic sort of activities for the teeming youths that are out of job, to get something to do? And then the impact of the economy on security, that pool of unemployed persons that are out there, that are being recruited by the bandits, by terrorists, how are the governors going to take that pool away, provide things for them to do? So those are the kind of things I'm hoping. Climate change, instead of banning open grazing, what innovative measures would you put in place to tackle climate change? Because essentially that open grazing is a consequence of climate change and its impact on the economy. So how are you going to turn that as against those divisive policies? How are you going to turn it into something that will bring the community together? Yes, ban open grazing, but then solve the bigger problem, which is climate change. So those are the things that I think the governors need to do to support the moves by the government. Essentially, I think the governors in the Northwest and North Central, they need to come together. We made it clear in that report that some of these forests straddle through several states. One forest can go through 5 states. So it's unfathomable to us, looking at that forest, that one governor, an example, Zamfara State, is doing something different, Katsina something different, and then Kaduna is something different, when they have one forest cutting across all of them. So we made the point that there is a need for them to come together and agree on a common policy. And more importantly, the federal government needs to provide that framework for that policy to work.
Very interesting. And of course, all of this is clearly a blow for the insurgents and the bandits, because if they're being attacked and killed, then clearly their numbers are being whittled down. I mean, what do we know of how this has affected their strength?
So in the last few weeks, several reports, both by the government and of course from our own atmospherics, have confirmed the killing of a lot of these bandits. Now the difficulty, unfortunately, is because you do not have a basis for which to compare their numbers, what they were before and what they are now. Yeah. It's a bit difficult. But then, I mean, there are enough facts that indicate to us that a lot of them have been killed.
But I mean, if there are thousands of them, if there are thousands from what we hear, and they kill 78, I mean, unless these are sort of strategic killings, you see what I mean, of people who are leading the route. I mean, it's not that many. It doesn't make a huge dent.
It is strategic. I haven't come across any verifiable record that would tell us the number of the bandits. Now, most of the codes that you hear is coming from Zamfara state, when the governor and some of the traditional rulers in the state mentioned that there are 300, and I think Sheikh Gumi also sort of repeated that, that there are 300 bases, and each of those bases have 300 members. Now, I am a bit hesitant to take that on. But what I know is that the bombing is strategic. Camps have been identified, and it is these camps that are being destroyed. Now, will it have a long-term effect on banditry in the region? Unfortunately, no. Because what normally happens is that these camps members, as it were, or their leadership, move from one camp to the other. And so it just takes them a little bit of time before they come back to what they were doing before. Right. What is more important is to dominate that forest and make it impossible for them to walk and live in those forests.
Well, I mean, that's the banditry. What about the insurgency? Does all this suggest that this conflict with insurgents is coming close to ending? Because that's what people want to hear. Or is this just one battle in many that are still being fought?
So it's a similar thing happening in the northeast with the insurgency or terrorism, depending on what you want to call it. In July and into August, we've recorded 40 times that members of both the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah al-Dawat wal-Jihad
and Boko Haram, basically, to us.
and the Islamic State in West Africa province. Yeah. Now, I don't like to tag them that, because it makes it difficult to differentiate between the two groups. Let's call them what they are. So their membership, as well as the families of the members, have been surrendering to the Nigerian army, and in droves. That. Yes. On our database, we've counted about 1,030 in the last 1 month surrendering, and this is a group that has a membership of about 6,000.
But is it ISWAP or is it Boko Haram?
Both, but more Boko Haram.
Right. Is that because their leader's been killed?
Three reasons. That's one.
Right.
2, infighting between the two groups. Right. And then 3, the interdiction operations by the Nigerian military has cut off their supplies. So food, water, fuel, everything they use in their camps have been cut off. So life in the camps have become extremely
And what happens to them when they surrender?
So this is what we sort of cautioned in the report. Based on the information available to us, they haven't relinquished that ideology. They are surrendering because of the circumstances they found themselves.
Privations.
Exactly. The ideology is still there, and if they get the opportunity, they would propagate the ideology. So one of two things: they could become informants, or they could become recruiters for either of these two groups. And so what is absolutely important is to put them through a counter-radicalization or a de-radicalization program, so that at the end of that program, you do an evaluation to confirm and ensure that they have relinquished that ideology before you release them to society. Another point...
We'll make that point when we come back, but please stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our assessment of the latest independent security report on Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Enyegolu. Now, in its latest raids on what it calls criminal gangs in northern Nigeria, the Nigerian army says it's killed at least 78 gunmen in an aerial bombardment of their hideouts. Of course, in Nigeria's increasingly lawless northern region, at least the remote areas of the north, criminality can go hand in hand with Islamist insurgency, and there's not much doubt in the government's fight against both. Lines are often blurred. At the same time, the Nigerian security forces are said to have killed dozens of people in operations against separatists in the southeast. According to one report, the deaths occurred during operations against the indigenous people of Biafra, or IPOB, which is fighting for independence from Nigeria. The government says the separatist group killed dozens of police officers. And the author of a new report on security in Nigeria, the CEO of the security firm Beacon Consulting, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. We're going to come to talk a little bit, because your report dealt with the separatists in the southeast as well. But first of all, why do you actually do this report? Why is it important?
Mainly to provide anyone interested in Nigeria a balanced view that would indicate what the threats are, more importantly, what the likely risks, both in terms of operation, in terms of assets, and all that, and then hopefully with that be able to provide the mitigation measures to allow an investor, as it were, to operate in Nigeria with that peace of mind. A lot of the reports that are out there are either skewed towards the side of the government or unfortunately against the government, as it were. So we thought we should provide something that is balanced, that would help investors in that regard. And of course, we do have a risk management arm that would support any investor who wants to understand the terrain in Nigeria and operate with very low risk, as it were.
Well, that's an important thing to do, basically. I mean, because obviously investment absolutely crucial. But there's been a new report that came out from Amnesty International that says that Nigerian security forces have killed dozens of people in operations against separatists in the southeast. And the suggestion is that these people are rounded up indiscriminately from the streets. Amnesty is saying that there needs to be a far more transparent process when it comes to trying to put people accused of violence on trial. What's your assessment of that report?
So first of all, I read through the report, and just like anyone who is into security in Nigeria could relate with what Amnesty was trying to do. However, I was against what the narrative that Amnesty was trying to put out there, that as it were, there is a perception in the Southeast that the current president, this current administration, has, as it were, more northerners within the security leadership, and that there is a targeted action against the Southeast. So that narrative was reinforced in that report.
Right.
And so I actually criticized that report, that one of the major humanitarian principles, even though Amnesty International is not a humanitarian organization, but if you are an international organization operating in another environment, you should uphold the do no harm principle. You cannot, in a circumstance where Nigeria is badly managing its diversity, you cannot put out something that would affect that inability to manage the diversity. So we felt that instead of being specific to the Southeast, why didn't Amnesty do a general report showing the high-handedness of the military?
So your argument is that basically that high-handedness is not limited to the southeast.
Of course,
it happens across
Charles,
every part of Nigeria.
I'll tell you in all confidence that my consultancy, the consultancy I founded, has received nothing less than 600 reports of youths that have disappeared in the Northeast, whose parents till date are looking for them. But unfortunately, because the media does not, people in the Northeast don't have access to the media, like in the Southwest, as an example. So most times you don't get to hear that story. As of today, I know of mothers that are actively looking for their children that have disappeared for over 10 years from the Northeast. So it's not specific to the Southeast. It's something that is unfortunately happening almost across the whole country. And so let's address it as an institutional failure, and not an institutional failure against a specific region, but an institutional failure that affects the whole country.
Nevertheless, I mean, the point that Amnesty International is making is that there is a specific instance. I mean, I suppose Amnesty also tends to follow the news. I mean, you've had Nnamdi Kanu in the news, you've had a lot of all that sort of thing. And the consequence of his arrest and all the rest of it, and the crackdown on that part of the region has elicited that kind of reaction from them. That's the argument that they're making.
Well, again, I go back to the do no harm principle. You cannot, in your desire to propagate what you feel is a national discourse, then create more problems. No, I would uphold peace anywhere, and I would try my best, as it were, to achieve peace. But you cannot do it by reinforcing a perception that is actually leading to more division within the country. That's my argument. And I cannot accept the argument that Amnesty is not aware that that perception is out there. Everybody who understands what Nigeria is going through understands that Nnamdi Kanu's argument is that there is a level of marginalization against the Southeast. So that report, unfortunately, thought to reemphasize
strengthens that point. So your sense is that Amnesty should have made reference to that as well as other parts of the country.
Exactly. Now, the argument may be resources and difficulty and all that. Right. But then, again, I go back to the do no harm. And a lot of what are available we could support. I have a data set that would gladly give it out to Amnesty International to expand their report so that it's national and not sectional.
Well, I have to say that your report, because I mean, you've just come up with your own security report, which is a very well-respected sort of the beacon consulting report that's used by a lot of people both in and out of Nigeria as a reference point. And I have to say that your report is always very well spread out across the entire country. But it's a different type of report from what Amnesty are doing. But let's return to the issue of banditry and what the Nigerian army calls criminality in the north. I mean, the government has said that this criminality, this banditry, tends to go hand in hand with the Islamist insurgency. How so?
For 2-3 years now, we've seen what I would call a strategic move by the insurgency in the northeast to form a partnership with the groups in the northwest, and that strategic partnership is not exactly ideological, but I would say criminal. Commercial, yeah. That's the better word. And in particular, and this is something that we're studying, the abductions that are taking place. Is it possible, for instance, that the monies, the ransom that is coming in, it's supporting the northeast insurgency operations by the terrorists? It's a possibility. Let's remember that not too long ago, last month, the UN Security Council released a report where it showed that funding for terrorism was increasing, and one of the particular areas it mentioned was from ransom, kidnap for ransom. So I think it's absolutely important that as Nigeria's counter-terrorism strategy, we look closely at that linkage. It is strategic, and unfortunately it could provide an avenue for the resilience and growth for the insurgent groups in the northeast.
And what about the northwest? I mean, we've got about a minute or less left in the chat. Is what we're dealing with in the northwest largely banditry, or are there signs that there could be a semblance of the insurgency there as well?
Largely, it's criminal in nature, but it's evolving. And it's that evolution that worries me. It's evolving because several things have happened. We've not managed it very well. And so the insurgent groups have seen an opportunity, and they are capitalizing on that opportunity.
I have to say, always a delight to talk with you. Dr. Kabiru Adamu, CEO and founder of Beacon Consulting, the security firm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.